Hi, my name is Nasim Yazdani and I'm a mental health therapist. Before I go into any further details, I'd like to ask that you please turn on the closed caption on this video. I have prepared this blog for you to increase awareness around our three main internal sensory systems that are often not talked about or not considered when thinking about a child's dysregulated state as a whole. Learning about our sensory systems is going to help us be more tuned in with our children's needs and provides us with more practical tools in response to the sensory stimuli around them. In order to be able to do this work, I'm going to share my screen with you.
Now, human beings have a lot in common with other mammals, and having an emotional brain is one of them. Emotional brain is often referred to as the brainstem and the limbic brain combined. Our emotional brain is responsible for receiving, processing, and storing sensory information from the outside world. We know that people's brain develops from bottom to up, so from the brainstem all the way up to cortex. Now, knowing that sensory systems live in the brainstem, it is fair to conclude that if there is a change in sensory processing, the whole brain chemistry changes. Children who don't process senses properly will become more reactive or more avoidant of them. Now, what they often teach us at school is that there are 5 external sensory systems that are processed by the brain, and these are system of touch, taste, vision, hearing, and smell. And what they don't teach us at school is that there are 3 main internal sensory systems that are also processed by the brain, and these are tactile sensory system, proprioceptive system, and the vestibular system. These internal systems pretty much start in our brainstem, which is the absolute first part of the brain that is developed in the womb and is connected to our nervous system. Now, starting with the vestibular system. When you think vestibular, you've got to think balance. Vestibular fluid exists within the ears and it changes as we age. Have you ever wondered why you used to love those thriller rides in Dream World as a young child, and nowadays you can get sick by just looking at them? Our vestibular system is a contributor to our balance system and our sense of spatial orientation. Has anyone ever been diagnosed with vertigo or feeling genuinely out of balance? If you've ever experienced that, then you'll know what it means for your vestibular system to be out of whack. Vestibular sensory system provides a dominant input about movement and equilibrium. This is why when you see a child that jumps around constantly and can't sit still, you can safely assume that they have some sort of vestibular or balance issues. What we often refer to as clumsy kids, it's really kids who have relationship issues with their inner ear and their ability to keep balance, which in technical terms means having vestibular sensory issues. So it's not because they're clumsy, but it's because their vestibular sense hasn't properly developed. Activities like balance bowls, activities like juggling, standing on one foot, these are all the things that you can do to help with vestibular development. Now, I'm going to spend a bit of time on the proprioceptive system. When you think proprioceptive, think pressure on your joints, in your muscles, and in your tendons. Proprioception is often called our hidden sixth sense. Proprioceptive system helps us know where our limbs, arms, and legs are in space at any given moment, which is important for our coordination. For example, when we take a sip of our drink, we don't have to really look at the cup as it goes into our mouth. We can move it there to our mouth with our eyes closed if needed be. Our proprioceptors, which live in our tendons, send the information about where our hand and therefore the cup is through to the brain for us. Now, our proprioceptive system also grades our force and speed of movement. For example, when you press that button on the TV controller, You need to press it with enough force to make it work. It's also important to not press it too firmly, as it might slide out of your hands or break. Or if you're pressing too gently, it might not work at all. This is called grading your force. If we think back to the cup, we typically don't crush the cup into our mouth. Our proprioceptive senses make sure that our hand moves smoothly and slowly enough to reach our mouth without hitting ourselves in the face or spilling water. In theory, at least, if they're working well. Our proprioceptive system also helps maintain our muscle tolerance and maintain our balance. This is super important. If you stand on one foot and close your eyes, you should feel some movement at the ankle. These are your proprioceptors telling your brain what's happening with your legs. They're also helping your vestibular sense to make sure that you don't fall over. Now, when the proprioceptive system doesn't process the information that it receives, there are typically two responses. Some children and adults may be seeking out proprioception input by jumping and crashing, chewing items, walking on their toes, biting, hanging off things, pushing. Some children and adults are slower to respond to their inputs, which means there are more proprioceptive input to understand where their body is in space. So they need that more of an input to understand where their body is in this space. For instance, using too much force that may accidentally break items, or they are often described as having weak muscles and may use too little pressure in doing things. They may be leaning or slumping on walls, furniture, or other objects. Or they may become tired easily. Tactile sensory system refers to our sense of touch. Tactile doesn't just refer to our hands. It is the main way that we perceive external input information through our skin, which has many receptors all over our bodies for all different kinds of sensations. When someone is tactile avoidance, any light touches may trigger a negative response. And people who are tactile seeking will look for any type of touch, not caring where it's coming from. Excessive masturbation, for example, is a type of a tactile sensory seeking behavior. Now, what does it mean to be sensory sensitive? In answering this question, I'd like to use an example that Angie Voss refers to in helping people understand what it means to be sensory sensitive. Angie Voss is an occupational therapist who specializes in sensory integration with over 22 years of experience working with children with sensory difficulties. Now, to give that example, let's imagine driving down the road in your car when it starts to drizzle. It's very light at first, and you can easily and safely ignore the few raindrops that are gently hitting your car window. The brain at this point sees the sensory input as quite irrelevant and not important. Then it starts to rain just a little bit harder. You really start to notice it now. Then it begins to pour down. At this stage, you have to use your windshield or you'll have to park your car under a tree. You simply cannot function or drive safely without your wipers. Now use this scenario to imagine how a child who over-registers sensory input must feel with any type of sensory messages. Yet the difference is the windshield wipers are just not working. Sometimes not turning on at all, and sometimes too slowly, or not at the right time, or consistent. And they just don't have the skills to find themselves a shelter, hence the behavioral issues and the outbursts that we see every day. Now, you can either over-register or under-register sensory input. Understimulated or overstimulated sensory system can give different effects. Sensory avoidant kids, for instance, might avoid one type of a texture or be very sensitive to touch to a point that it might be painful for them. Sensory seeking kids, on the other hand, might be too clingy, constantly wanting hugs and seeking any form of touch. Sensory diet and behavioral journals are very useful tools that you can use to keep a record of your child's sensory preferences. Being aware of a child's sensitivities to sensory inputs such as sound, touch, movement, and smell can assist you to adapt the environment in order to reduce their anxiety and accommodate for their sensory needs.